Today's episode is presented by Lodestar, the fee experts.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of Lending Leaders. Our guest today is Greg Uttal, president of Cyberlink Software Solutions. Been a great friend of Lodestar for a number of years. Greg, really excited to have you on the podcast. Thanks so much for coming on today.
Oh, yeah. I appreciate the opportunity. I've watched all your podcasts. I get them every week, look at them. Excited to be part of that community.
Good, a true friend of the pod. Well, don't worry, you get a gift for this too, so you'll get some swag out of the time. So I appreciate it. So, Greg, you've been no stranger to the mortgage industry. You were saying you got started in the late 70s, got started in mortgage technology in the 80s, been president of Cyberlink Software Solutions since 95, helping mortgage companies navigate the changing world of technology, which has changed a lot since 1995. So how'd you get started in the industry?
It's a good question. A lot of people just fall into this industry because they were in between something coming out of college and got started and just never left. I'm in the business because my family has been in the mortgage business since 1940. My grandfather was in the business. My father was in the business. And honestly, when I was in high school, I didn't know what to do with myself. So I started as a messenger for a mortgage company. And so many others just stayed in. Didn't know what else to do with my life, and this turned out to be really exciting.
Similar for me. I was climbing on filing cabinets at my family's title company. I remember when they had typewriters to type out their policies. So I always say you stumble in or you get born into the industry. So it looks like we're both in the latter.
Yeah, I think it's a good way to get started. And being with the family, if I wanted to be part of the conversation at Thanksgiving, I needed to be in the mortgage business because that's all we ever talked about.
So you had mentioned your two kids there. Any of them keeping the tradition alive, going for the fourth generation?
Sort of. The oldest one is in commercial real estate. Never got the bug for the mortgage industry, but he kind of fell into commercial real estate by accident. Did an interview just because somebody challenged him to do it. They loved him so much they brought him on. He's been in commercial real estate for about 11 years now and does a fantastic job nationally across the country.
Yeah. Fair enough. I mean, it's a wide-reaching industry, right? You can always deal with industry, real estate. Everyone needs a place to live, a place to work. So,
exactly,
it's interesting to see how those trends happen. So, lots of changes over your time, right? Technology-wise, what do you feel has been the most significant change through your time in the industry?
You know what? I think of all the things that have changed, there's a lot that really hasn't changed. One thing that did change dramatically for me, anyways, was in 1982. HUD came out with a bulletin that said if you originated loans electronically, that you could pay for those loans to be originated. In other words, you could pay a realtor, you could pay a third party. In those days, no one knew what electronically really meant. So we were thinking fax machines and other things like that. But we also were one of the first companies in the country to be fully automated from the beginning to the end, from a prospect to foreclosing, everything we did through our internal system. We figured out really quickly that we could adapt that system and put dumb terminals in real estate offices and put loan officers in real estate offices in 1982. So for me, that was the pivotal change. Everything else before and after that has really been pretty much the same. It hasn't dramatically changed. It's still a people business. We still have to do things pretty much the same way that we've done it, but the delivery channels have just expanded amazingly with the technology.
Right, so just the ability to originate electronically.
Exactly. That was, to me, was the biggest change. And then, of course, the internet, when it came along.
Yeah, that was the answer I thought you were going to say.
Well, that is the standard answer because we were the first company in the country to have a network of dumb terminals using technology called multiplexers to connect real estate offices. And we had every capability that you have today. Quote an interest rate, pre-qualify a borrower, take an application, print documents. We did all that in the real estate office.
So when you're starting to originate electronically or then over the internet, how have you seen kind of the industry's apprehension to adapt and adopt this new technology? Because I want to tie it to what's happening now, but would love to hear about it in hindsight with your experience in the 80s and the 90s with the advent of the internet.
Well, I really thought things were going to move along much faster. My dad and I had a conversation in 82, 83, 84 about how this technology is going to change the mortgage business in the next 5 years. Look out. The whole world's going to change. It really didn't for 30 years.
Yeah.
I had a similar conversation with Bob Pathman over at MERS. He came over
Mm-hmm.
in early 2000, asked us to build an application for the MERS system. And
Yeah.
both Bob and I looked at each other and said, if we build this, it's going to be dead in 5 years. The whole world's going to adapt. But neither
Mm-hmm.
statement was true. And
Right.
neither part of the world adapted that quickly. So I'm just
Mm-hmm.
surprised at how slow the change has come about. Although in the last 10 years, maybe 15, it really has moved quickly. But prior to that, it was a crawl.
Mm-hmm. Well, what do you think the reasons are for that slowness for change?
Well, back when we built our computer system, we spent $1 million in the early 80s putting the
Yeah.
system together. So cost was a huge
Mm-hmm.
roadblock. I also hear a lot when we go into shops to help them out. We hear, well, we've always done it this way.
Yeah.
And so I think there's kind of a mental block that says we're doing it and it's working. We know we need to improve, but maybe tomorrow.
Right.
And tomorrow ends up being a year and years down the road.
Mm-hmm. And what do you think finally got people to a point where they would adopt new technology?
To me, it's got to be regulations. There is absolutely no way to keep up with any of this without having some type of technology to adapt to it. Plus,
so really,
more people. You can reach anybody in the country with just a simple, basic computer today. No big deal.
I still consider the industry slow to change, right? I think digital closings is a good example. That technology has been around since early 2000s, right? Probably 15, 20 years, the ability to digitally sign.
Well, what's interesting is I just read an article about Cyberlink dated 1995, and it was in a MERS bulletin to all its members. And in the 1995 bulletin, the president of MERS was announcing e-notes and said that MERS had the capability to do e-notes, or will have the capability.
29 years ago.
And thought this was going to be a big thing.
I was in the first grade. Yep. Yeah.
And here we are. E-notes are still just in the infancy stage of coming about. They're being used, but they're not widely used as they could be.
Is that because of regulation, to your previous point? Is that what hurts the adoption?
I think it has been regulation. It's been slow to convert all the different counties to get everybody in line, get the rules lined up, the regs lined up, the counties lined up. It's hard when you're a gigantic lender that you have to do this with every county across the country. I think it's a lot easier if you're a small lender and you only can stay within your region, much easier to adopt.
Yep. And then in addition to digital closings, are there other changes that you would feel are in that category, whether technology that's been around for a decade or so, or that is just more nascent, that you think it's going to affect the industry going forward?
I've got an idea that has been in my head for a long time. Actually, we developed it at our company Affinity in 2002. We thought at that point in time that the loan application would probably disappear as we know it. And what we would do is we would do an electronic application that would be, for lack of technical terms, backfilled with data. Early 2000s at Affinity, we had enough data to complete a loan application for a client front to beginning. And it was everything except for deposits was readily available. Employment was the next thing, was a challenge, but we had some availability. So I really thought that we would lose the application. It would be more like, give me your social security number, give me your name, and I'll give you the application. You validate what I'm telling you is correct, and we would move on from there. But I don't know if that'll ever happen, but I think it should.
Right. Well, then my question is, isn't there a uniform loan application? Like, there was regulation around that uniform application that came out in the last few years. So how does that hinder, what you were looking to do, in your opinion?
Well, we've had the uniform application for a long time. When I first started the business, every lender made up their own application. It was just a piece of paper with some questions, real simple. But the 1003 has been around for a long time. It standardized the process, but it also complicated it because it's not user friendly and it's not a people type of document. It's got a lot of blanks and a lot of things that you fill out, and a lot of things that aren't important to some people or not needed by some people. So it's been around a long time, but it has quantified the information better than what we've done in the past. But on the same time, it has made it a more personal experience.
So is that a slowness of regulation and a completeness of regulation, or people not adapting to the technology, to the tools that are there now?
Yep, I think it's all three. It's on top of it, we have, at least in my experiences, I've heard different interpretations of regulations over the years by the same government agency, for example, we would talk to HUD in one state and they would give us their opinion on what was in a bulletin, and we would talk to HUD in a different state and they would have a different
Hmm.
interpretation of the exact same
Yeah.
regulation. So if
Yeah.
we can't get it right within the one government
Hmm.
organization, HUD,
Right.
how do the rest of us get it right?
Yeah, I think the fragmentation in this industry is a big problem for that change, right? On the county level, on the state level, on the different
Right.
federal bureau level, it makes it really difficult. And every now and then you get someone coming in saying, "Hey, let's put everything on the blockchain," or there'll be AI mortgage lenders or whatever, and then they
Yeah.
quickly just run into the same headwinds that everyone else does. Not to say there's not a place for that technology, but I think you need to understand, why it hasn't happened yet in a lot of cases.
I think you're right on with that.
Hmm.
I had a client
Yeah.
I helped start up their mortgage company. I was a consultant for them, and they really thought they were
Mhm.
going to change things in about a year to 2 years. And
Yeah.
they've done a great job, an amazing job. But they've also
Hmm.
learned you can't change
Yeah.
anything in the business in a year to 2 years. It just,
Yeah.
doesn't happen like that. So, yeah,
We
too much.
we have a running joke in our. Sorry, go ahead.
No, too much fragmentation. You're right.
Yeah. We have a running joke with our sales team when we talk to a lender. I just want a lender to say, like, yeah, we have about 20 loan officers, and that's fine. We're good. We're fine. Every lender is just, oh, we're going to be huge. We're going to be huge. We're going to be huge. And, running a business, I understand you need to think that way, obviously, but it's just funny. Everyone has those designs, and it, ends up meeting somewhere in the middle.
It's the nature of being an entrepreneur,
Yeah.
which every
Hmm.
mortgage company starts off that way. You're an entrepreneur. You
Yeah.
want to build a business, and you build.
Hmm.
You don't
Yeah.
build to stay complacent.
Being an entrepreneur, thinking of things you built, I mean, from the beginning of your career when you're automating or getting electronic mortgages, there always seems to be this push for automation, right?
Mhm.
Now, so it's less of a whisper, more of a scream, right? So how has that changed? How do you feel like people are approaching automation now? It seems like every other whisper of what I hear is automation, automation. We need to automate.
We hear it a lot, and boy, with
Hmm.
AI, I mean, just the difference of 3 years ago, AI
Yeah.
was nothing we were really talking about, and within 12
Right.
months, AI became the main topic. I mean, automation is critical because there's so many redundant tasks that we have to go through, and things that we have to do that you just can't make a mistake
Hmm.
on. And unfortunately,
Right.
humans make mistakes.
Hmm.
It's not intentional, but we're fallible.
Yeah.
But I think on the automation front, the commitment to automation and the conversation of automation are two different things.
Hmm.
And what I mean by that is when I talk to like managers, department managers or supervisors, and they hear about automation, they really like the idea and want to do it. But when it gets up to the senior executive level, I don't know if everybody is really on the same page in that group. If they really fully understand it, are really educated towards it, probably are. But it's
Hmm.
a big commitment in money and time, and it's one of those types of things that better now than later.
Right.
And I think that senior level commitment is not always there.
Is it because of the capital expense, or it's not viewed as a true ROI product, or they're concerned about the effect on the team? Like what kind of holds up those discussions in
I
your
think it
mind?
goes back to the same idea. We've been doing it this way for a long time, and I'm afraid to
Yeah.
make a change. But it is
Hmm.
also the capital expense. It's not cheap to
No.
automate. The other problem is that when we're working with clients to automate, we quite often run into, well, let's just automate two things and let's see how that
Right.
works. And the
Yeah.
problem is if you just automate two workflows, you're not going to see anything. You're not going to really
Yeah.
notice any lift from that. So you really have to be in it to win it with automation and committed to automate a department. So
Hmm.
look at like processing, look at like post closing, and don't automate a task of ordering an appraisal. That really doesn't do much to help your organization. Look at
Right.
how I can automate 85 to 90% of what we're doing in a full entire
Hmm.
department and develop a plan for that department.
Right.
Then you'll see the lift that you'll get and you'll see the value and get your ROI out,
Yeah.
calculation much easier.
I think that's a good point because all too often people say, "Hey, let me save 10 minutes per loan across
Mm-hmm.
these 200 loans for someone." That's not insignificant, but that's actually not, to your point, actionable, right? That's easy time for someone to fill, opposed to really
Right.
replacing a whole department or a sizable percentage of the job. But the question that always comes up, then what about that department? What's the role of those people? What happens to those people? Is it realistic that people automate 85 to 90% of a task and then let a bunch of people go? Like, how does it end up looking like from a human perspective?
Well, I think right now we happen to be in a unique position that the volume of
Mm-hmm.
applications has been so low from 2023
Yeah.
that the next problem that we're going to have is ramp up.
Yep.
And I've been through this. Everybody that we're probably listening to this podcast has been through this. Is we unfortunately have to lay off folks at some point in time.
Yeah.
They get disenchanted with the industry and they may leave. Maybe it's temporary, but they leave. And now all of a sudden rates drop and we have to ramp up quickly and we can't find the talent. Yeah. So right now would be a great time to really put an automation plan into play, because the next problem we're going to have, I think we're going to have, I hope we have it because it'll be more business, but it's going to be more business.
Yeah, absolutely.
So put the automation in today, and then you won't have to lay anybody off. What you'll be able to do is you'll be able to take people, what I call the McDonald's approach. You'll be able to take a young person who can barely do a technical aspect or a complicated aspect, but they can sell 1 billion burgers. And let's put them in the mortgage side, and they can do the remedial tasks and use the highest quality people to expand and grow the business.
Yep. Yeah, and I think that's where the real power of automation, of AI is, let's replace 80% of a task, and then that remaining bit, that's high value for a person. Right? That's high value for a person to do review, to deal with problems, to clear exceptions, whatever it may be.
And you're still going to do the review. I mean, right now, when we look at a loan file, we're reviewing that file 2, 3, 4 times before closing, and then again at closing, then again after closing.
Right.
But if you could get it down so that the bots, the RPA, or the automation that you're using is taking care of 85% of what you're doing, and you only have to audit really one time based on what you're coming to the final conclusion because you know how the bots operate, that'll be a big change for the business, and you'll use your most talented people for that task.
So looking at automation or implementing AI in tasks, what do you feel are the low-hanging fruit of the types of departments or tasks that are kind of that best first step?
I think processing or post-closing, those are two I mentioned previously, are the two that you really start to focus on. Underwriting is too difficult to automate because there are too many nuances in working with many different investors. I think it'll come about sometime, but right now today, AI is not there for underwriting. So let's not think about underwriting. I think you could do processing. I think you could do post-closing. I think you could do servicing. Those 3 areas could be done very effectively because they are very rudimentary. They're very routine. The process is very, very routine.
And when I was at the most recent MBA annual conference this fall, I was in the session where everyone was talking and asking questions for the MBA, and a lot of people were talking about, hey, all this automating is great, all this automation is great, but it hasn't saved us any money. It hasn't made a loan cheaper for us, right? And I think we've talked about it before. A lot of people say, well, you're automating the front end, right? And that's actually not going to save you any money by automating sales, outreach, customer conversations, things like that. It's not going to make a big difference. And I think to your point, on the other end is people try to automate, appraisal ordering or 10% of a task opposed to the whole task. Are there other things that you see, when you hear that complaint of, oh, it's not making loans any cheaper, loans are more expensive to originate than ever?
Well, therein lies the problem, is that if you have a ongoing concern that's running and everything is working fairly well, but you need to cut your costs, we know you do. And the only place you can really cut your costs the quick way is labor, but you don't want to lay people off. So that's why I say now is a good opportunity to get started.
Right.
But the reality is the cost to originate loans has continued to go up as well as technology has advanced. So the perfect scenario would be if I had a brand new mortgage company starting today, 100% or as close as I could get to automation, because it's much easier to see the ROI and get the benefits starting from a blank slate than it is trying to convert an existing company. And the bigger the company, the harder that conversion is going to be.
Yeah, no, makes sense. Let's see. No, I think that touches on a lot of the topics with automation. With lenders, lastly, who are doing it well. What do you see? The folks who are really prepared for that volume uptick, hopefully in the next year.
Our typical client is not the largest lender. With our eRamp product, the MERS transaction management solution, we have lenders that are doing 15,000 loans a month. So we see that aspect, but it's a very narrow window as to what they're doing. For the smaller companies, I just don't see the automation in place that they really haven't adopted well to be able to take advantage for when we're going to need more resources when volume ticks up. So Right now, I think there's just a big gap between thinking about it and actually executing it. And I think the problem is it's hard to change what's already entrenched in your company, but you got to do it. I believe
you said, I think so. I mean, are there companies that are too small to automate at the end of the day? Like, is this something that helps companies of any size?
Yes, there is. Depending on how you go about the automation. If you're going to write scripts, which is the typical way that you automate by creating RPA scripts, it's very expensive and it's time consuming. If you use a rapid development platform where there are no scripts and all you're doing is dragging and dropping the technology or the work actions in place, you can cut your costs dramatically. In a smaller company, say 100 loans a month, 60 loans a month, can start to make sense of it. Below that, it's very difficult to justify any return. And I know a lot of people listening to this are going to say, oh, you can't do it with 100 loans. Well, that's because they're thinking about writing scripts. But with drag and drop,
opposed to using out of the box technology. I think that's a good point, especially with AI. Everyone wants to build a large language model or build all this stuff in house. Ultimately, for you to leverage technology, you have to find those existing tools and products that are lightweight enough to go in and do that. So you get to see, the value of it at a smaller size.
Now, one of our clients I was speaking to a couple of weeks ago said they only automate a little bit with RPAs, a little bit here and there. And the reason is it's too expensive. But they hadn't used a drag and drop type of methodology or platform. So they're writing scripts. It takes them 4 months to write a script. And that's really expensive. Drag and drop.
Well, you're dealing with, these companies may not be aware that even exists, right? Like it's,
they're not.
You don't kind of vet technology in the right way. Yeah. So everyone talk to Greg, if you're listening to this point. Last conversation, or last question that I have, Lodestar means, North Star guiding light. So we always want to talk to people about what inspires us. You talked a bit about being born in this industry, being a huge part of your life. What keeps you going? What gets you out of bed, excited to work on RPAs, on automation, on all these things, helping lenders?
Well, I am definitely inspired by my family because they have been through all of it. But I would say my more general answer is it's people. Yeah. I'm inspired by people and the creativity and the resiliency of people. Every generation has dealt with a lot of problems, and certainly we're dealing with problems today. But when we have problems, we start to become better. We become our best, and we start to solve problems in a way that we hadn't ever thought about before. I look at people like Elon Musk and just say, if these problems didn't exist, would he be where he is? Would he be the guy that he is today? The answer is probably no, because these unusual and huge problems that he tackled, to me, that's inspiring. And I know we have not just Elon, we have a lot of people in this country and around the world that are like that. I think that's very inspiring to think of how we're going to be better next week or next year or the next century than we are today.
Yeah, bright people rise to the occasion, to your point. I think that's a great note
to end
on. Yeah.
I don't like sitting around being complacent. I like to see where are we going to be and what's going to happen next.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, it's that entrepreneur in you, right? We don't sit still that well. So, Well, Greg, it was great having you on. I appreciate your time in the conversation. Thanks, everyone, for listening, and see you all next week. Have a good one.
I appreciate it, Jim. Take care.